get rolling.
Okay. I like it, man. This is episode 4, the D&D podcast. We've got Dustin and Dave here, sponsored by FitusFi, the investor's lender. We're a private money lender based here in Winter Park. And so we can help with any construction needs and also for investors looking for fixed income returns as well. So little plug about us, but we're excited to have you with us. Beautiful Wednesday morning. And got some good topics to cover today.
Yeah, I think we're gonna go a little deeper than our prior 3 episodes. Just talk about mindset and things like that. But before we get into that stuff, just on the light side, Peterson, your last name is Danish.
It is Danish.
Okay.
It is Danish. But like many people, they're a conglomeration of all different cultures over times. But yes, officially Danish. Yeah.
Very cool. And so I was just in Denmark, and Denmark is apparently sponsored by 7-Eleven.
That's quite interesting. Yeah, because we were just saying offline that usually in most 7-Elevens you're kind of in and out, but you're making it seem like it's a pretty good experience over there.
When you land in Copenhagen, like everything in the airport is like the fanciest 7-Elevens, and then you're like, oh, that's interesting. Like they must have a really big deal with the airport.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get into Copenhagen and the town, and there's like 7-Elevens everywhere. They're like, and they're nice. They're like, they have like pressed juice. They have like nice, better sandwiches, and you still got your roller dogs and your typical 7-Eleven
Some
garbage.
of the European food, you still got to have that.
Yeah. But I think they're also pretty into hot dogs over there, so that might be why they have the whole 7-Eleven thing going on.
Okay. I'll make sure as soon as I get over there to check that out first.
I think being
the
Danish, you'll be impressed.
Where's the 7-Eleven?
Everywhere.
Get out of here. Yeah, everywhere.
All right. Well, so actually digging in here, what Dave and I were thinking about talking to everyone about today was like, there's you hear all these kind of like just business opinions, life opinions of like how what's everybody's favorite quote, what's their motivation, how do they how do they look at the world? And there's the David Goggins that are like, your body can do way more than you think it can. Your mind can do way more than you think it can. You're just going to push yourself, to the limit. And I thought I'd have you read off Dana White's favorite quote here from Bruce Lee about there being no limits.
Yeah, from Bruce Lee, the legend here. Because you might as well be dead. Seriously, if you always put limits on what you can do, physical or anything else, it'll spread over into the rest of your life. It'll spread into your work, into your morality, into your entire being. There are no limits. There are plateaus, but you must not stay there. You must go beyond them. If it kills you, it kills you. A man must constantly exceed his level. Yeah, I love that quote.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty awesome. It kind of talks about like, your self-doubt, your I guess that part of you as more of like a sickness. It's infectious to all aspects of your life, right? So, if you're like, hey, I can't do this, or I'm never going to be better at this, like it kind of affects he even says your morality. So like, how good of a person you are, your whole being, affects your work. You don't think you can do things. While I love that, I think that, you are much more capable than you think you are. And you see the people that are really successful, like, that had that gumption, that self-esteem, that like, they maybe grew up with a parent that was like very supportive to like think that they could ever run a billion or near $1 trillion company one day, like Zuckerberg, like thinking he could, start Facebook. And, while there was all these other companies that had, ideas for that, social media network, like Microsoft had stuff going on, Google had stuff going on, but they were such big ships. They couldn't really, pivot fast enough and put something together and focus on it. And,
Yeah, I think sometimes too, when you're talking about the removing limits, sometimes it can be based on how people are grown, are raised, that they, see limits have been imposed on them, either how they're thinking or whatever it might be. And so you mentioned that a lot of times people had such a supportive parent or whatnot, but also there could be those that maybe had seen, struggles and things that their parents had and kind of limits placed on them. So they want to make sure that as the child and then as an adult, they don't want to have those limits. They don't want to let those limits be imposed on them, kind of breaking through that. You know what I mean? The opposite of what they saw. But yeah, I think, a lot of times people that are super successful have had that, really good person that says, you can do it. There aren't those limits, be supportive. But I feel like you can get people from that had that, positivity and the support, and then those that didn't, that wanted to change that kind of mind thinking too.
Oh, it could be the opposite motivation.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you didn't have that. You didn't have the father
Correct.
figure. You didn't have whatever, and you want to push through that. I don't know, what a lot of individually very successful people's like actual background is, because all you really see from them is like whatever they're selling on social media,
True.
or like whatever they're pitching you. But you do generally see people that like accomplish extraordinary things all the time that are pitching the same thing here. Like you just have to push through. You have to like you have to 10x your goals if you're Grant Cardone, or if you're Nick Bare, you can be somebody that's a hybrid athlete that's super strong and also like a great long distance ultra marathon runner. So your body can do both. You can be 225 pounds and still run marathons.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people almost put limits on themselves based on, they don't want to sometimes outshine other people, or this is my group of people that I've always been with. I want to keep myself in that box. I don't want to shine. You impose that limit even if it's not on purpose, but you look back and you're like, man, I maybe held myself back there a little bit, and really that's kind of limiting yourself to what you can do, what you can think, what you can be. And so, no, I love this quote.
And Dave, you went to University of Florida.
I did. Go Gators.
And that's in Gainesville, and spent a lot of time up there. Did you ever run into any of these folks out there in that Ocala National Forest area? They're a lot of Buddhists and people out in the woods practicing yoga, and on the other end of the spectrum, not pushing through limits and busting through ceilings, and David Goggins, who's going to carry the boats?
I fortunately, well, I guess not necessarily fortunately, but I didn't really see them, but I did hear about them, so I know they're there. And but yeah, like they were to each their own, I guess.
Yeah, well, a gentleman who spent a lot of time in Gainesville is this author, Michael Singer. He wrote The Untethered Soul. He also wrote this book, The Surrender Experiment, and it was recently recommended to me. Because I was going through something similar to the author, and the book is about the opposite of the Bruce Lee quote. It's about not necessarily like pushing through your ceiling, or like trying to just force things to work and 10x and all this stuff. It's about surrendering to the flow of life and paying attention to the coincidences around you, what the universe is kind of telling you is the opportunity. And so just in business, I know you mentioned that you and your wife talk about these things and stuff. So, where do you kind of, land on this spectrum of like push through the ceiling and crush it, or
I think it depends on the day. No, but in all seriousness, yeah, my wife and I talk about this all the time, and even with some other friends of ours too, that, sometimes you let things happen. You let things happen the right time. You don't force it. Things should be natural. Things should sometimes just be easy and fall into place. It shouldn't be like you're banging your head against the wall, forcing things all the time. Now, like we said with the Bruce Lee quote, there are some times where you need to seize the opportunity and know that you have the potential to do big things and push through and not limit yourself. But there are definitely some times where it's just like, let things unfold the way they're supposed to. And sometimes they come out, or they end up much better than if you would try to force them. And it's usually on a different timeline. So I do think the universe has a plan. It's just sometimes letting the plan work out and not be on your own timing, which usually doesn't mesh.
Yeah, and I haven't given this next thing I'm about to say like any prior thought, so I'm not sure if it's going to make sense. But I think kind of the hybrid here is kind of surfing. And my wife is always teasing me about my analogies and the way I explain things, because our brains are wired very differently, as you may know with your wife. But I think surfing might be a good example here of like where it's both. You have to be kind of with nature. You have to literally go with the flow of like, the waves, the timing. pick the right one, paddle out, be there at the right time, kind of be in nature and let the universe, kind of guide you. But then when you get up, you need to go and you need to, you really need to shred. You need to like, do whatever you do surfing. And I think that's like, you can push yourself. You can really, go, into something, with all of your, heart and soul beyond what you think your limits are. You can ride a big wave and everything. But I don't know if that's,
I
maybe
think that's
something.
good. You're right. There's a time, it's time to crush it, but you got to wait for that opportunity sometimes. And if you paddle too early, you miss the whole wave. And so, as a non-surfer that would love to learn surfing, I can understand what you're saying, though, for sure.
P.S. I've been to Rincon, Puerto Rico now like 4 times, which is like a surf capital, and has been dead flat like every time I've
No,
been there.
really.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about like what's in this book. I obviously I would also recommend this book to anybody that is interested in hearing this side of the story, because it is wild how well it worked out for this author. So, and he kind of talks through like he graduated college and he literally didn't know anything about construction. Then he decided to build a house to live in, and then people just came to him and were like, "Hey, you're practicing yoga here at this house. Like, we want to practice with you too." And he eventually like decided like, "Okay, I'm going to let more people into my life. I'm going to surrender to the universe and let them into my house," which is weird. And then he's gonna like have a not a commune, but like a place where people can come and almost like a Buddhist temple eventually. That grows into an actual Buddhist temple. And then he is building more to add on to things, and he decides to become a general contractor. And then he has a super successful building company. And then somehow he sees a need, and he gets really into like developing things like web development. And this is kind of pre-dot-com bubble, and this time when everything's transitioning in the United States from paper to digital. And he then builds an extremely successful internet company and lands major contracts with Blue Cross Blue Shield and others for like payment processing, insurance processing for doctors' offices that are all on paper. So just like, just kind of like lets things come to him and then takes the opportunity, but then goes hard on it, like, and goes all the way in and works super hard on the project. Like, you have to be driven to become a general contractor and go through everything. You have to be driven to start a huge multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah, but I think what you're saying is smart is about being nimble to see the opportunities as they're happening. So kind of keeping your eyes open and knowing, okay, this is something to take advantage of and go for it. And then 100%, go all in once it's there, but kind of letting it, okay, now I'm in the web development and now I'm doing this and now I'm doing this. And maybe things in places he wouldn't have normally thought if he'd put limits on himself, where he would go, but it worked out great, kind of going with the flow.
I think these like fish in a barrel business opportunities that do come up from time to time kind of arise from, that being in the right place, right time, but also like being aware of like what's going on in the micro environment. And then, kind of like, finding a crease and finding a niche and finding a way to profit. And that's where entrepreneurs like live and thrive.
Yeah. I mean, how many times we look back and like just in conversation say, man, that was such an easy idea. Like, the guy's got $4 billion now, but like we could have thought of that. You know what I mean? And so you're right. Is like looking at the big picture, seeing how it can solve a problem or just meet a need, but then actually doing it and figuring
and
out
having that massive action,
correct,
right?
yeah.
Like to
Huge.
really accomplish it and follow the Bruce Lee
Yeah.
thinking is that you got to push past you can't have that, overarching, I can't accomplish this. You have to be
well, like
confident
in
you can.
most things, people see the end result. Like, man, that's awesome. The guys we're billionaire, but they don't see like the years and the hours and the stress and the money to actually do that. Even if it's a simple
10-year
idea and you figure out how to profit. Let's say you figure it out and no one else knows this idea, but to actually do it is really difficult. But people just see that end result. Man, that guy's living large. He's rich and all this stuff, but all the things it took to get there. That's why I've always been interested in like different documentaries that show the process of how people got to there. The people like we were talking offline just about like the Uber kind of whole story that's on Netflix, but really fascinating to see the challenges that he pushed through. And so, like you said, kind of a little bit of both, the Bruce Lee quote and the surrender thing. You got to know when to let things happen, but then also when it's time, don't limit yourself on what you can do once you have that idea, let's just say.
Then you can have the 10-year overnight success.
Yes.
Well, another book I really think that it hits on this topic, and one that I really love is recommended by my dad. It's written by Deepak Chopra, so obviously a very spiritual person, very Zen person. This book, to me, a lot of it, what I got from it, like, was like the universe shows you coincidences, and like, whatever you believe, if you pay attention to coincidences to help find those moments where the universe is showing you something to do to go really hard on later. I think that's where I see a lot of consistency across a lot of very successful entrepreneurs, business people I look up to, and others, that they, kind of, they've whether or not they've like consciously thought about those things, they've talked about, and you hear them on videos saying, oh, this happened, and then this happened, and then my friend did this, and it's kind of a ongoing coincidence that occurs that I think is something to pay attention to, and that's what I got from.
No, I think you're right, that realizing sometimes it's not really coincidences. There must be sort of a pattern, and realizing the pattern and knowing what to do with it. But yeah, I think that's great. That's awesome concept for sure. That a lot of times you start seeing the same things, you're like, maybe it isn't really coincidence. Maybe the universe or whatever is trying to tell me something, trying to lead me somewhere, and letting it do that. But like you said, a lot of people, they're just so busy now. We're so inundated with social media and life and work and all these different things. It's easy to not see those coincidences. It's easy to not realize them. Then you miss the opportunity.
Are there any that you can think of in your own life that are just kind of like wild coincidences that you paid attention to and that sparked anything for you?
Well, I think sometimes, like, if you're like, let's say my wife and I were talking about, oh, remember this past experience in the past with these people and this and that, and then you'll get a text from that person like the next day.
Yeah, that's
like,
weird.
Whoa,
right?
That's weird. We just talked about that. You know what I mean? And so, just things like that. And sometimes it's easier to look back on things too, and you're like, oh, that was trying to lead me here. Those are some coincidences, even if in the moment you didn't necessarily realize it. But what about for you?
I think just with having the company FiSFi and like my past work, there was a lot of like where it was 2007. I was in school. Everything was a short sale, and I really wanted to get into real estate because I'm really into economics, and I could see like, hey, we got some issues here if everybody's having to sell for less than the banks are owed on the properties, or the government's owed on the properties. And I kind of lucked into a role that was involved in like buying foreclosures, and then got into the private lending, and then there wasn't anybody doing the private lending. So if I had maybe stayed with it as an initial employee and tried to strike out on my own as early as I did, I probably would have had that, like the universe really guided me to something really special. Maybe I should have stayed put in the initial role I had for a little while, and probably would have had a lot more success there. Like you're talking about retroactive, but there was definitely some coincidences there. I think that.
Yeah, I think a lot of times the things that you kind of manifest and put out there and focus on too. I know like for me, when I was kind of switching over to insurance, I kind of put a timeline on myself of I want to be my own agency owner at this point in time. And it came from a different company, different source, but in that same time. And so you realize looking back, I had the power, I guess, to influence that a little bit, but also kind of make that to happen. But also sometimes the universe will bring you things when you think it is, you know what I mean? And when you really were putting your mind to that. And so, yeah, it's a lot of different, like I mentioned, I said, it depends on the day because all these different things tie in together, but there are also some stark differences too, we've talked about. So it is kind of difficult to, go with the flow, but then also take the opportunity that when it arises and go 100%, especially a lot of times, I'm sure you've run into this as well, but, people say, oh, you can't do that. No, it doesn't make sense. That's crazy. Why would you do that? So understanding that if you've got the vision, just to go full bore with it as well. There's always going to be people that say that don't understand what you're trying to do and where you're trying to get to.
Yeah, I think part of the lessons too is like don't just go hard into the wrong direction. Like be conscious about like what what the world is already doing. If politically things are happening one way, if the government's pushing one direction, if something's pushing one direction, and industry's trending one direction, you can monetize there and have that opportunity that's going to be much more successful for you because you have the tailwind literally
Sure.
of everything
Yep.
else pushing for you. So paying attention to those things and not just being narrow-minded on your current goal and just trying to force a square peg into a round hole scenario where you're just going to be kind of not getting anywhere and not paying attention to those coincidences in your life and surrendering to those things. So
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think the timing is everything for
Yeah.
sure.
So I hope you guys got something out of this one. Try to talk a little bit more business topics today, but
Let's do one last fun topic.
Okay, all right.
How about college football being back?
Hey,
How good is that?
love it.
As a Gator, I mentioned that we got a tough game against the Hurricanes on Saturday, so we'll see how that one goes. But I think UCF
you're
starts
playing
tomorrow.
at 3:30 in the heat.
3:30.
But you got a whole bunch of guys that can handle the heat.
Yeah, so Miami and
Not
UF,
playing Nebraska, so
right, they'll be fine for the heat. I don't know about the fans, even though we're used to it too, but it'll probably be 130 degrees. So hopefully everyone drinks enough water. But I'm excited, man. It's a good weekend.
dude, your schedule is insane.
It is.
Like I think UF if you guys make it over 500, it's going to be
I'll be
impressive. I mean, I'm personally hoping that that you guys do better than that. But wow, what a gauntlet of.
I mean, even like in a normal year, I was telling people it's still like the third hardest schedule at work. It's never like more than the fifth. So I'm not even that. It's like, yeah, okay, it's the first. It's the hardest. Yeah, well, it's kind of like what else is new. But yeah, this will be tough. So at this point, 500 would be pretty good. Especially if we're competitive in those games, right? But no, I'm excited. I think it's going to be, good year, new playoff. Yeah, very difficult to keep track of who's in what conference. So I'm excited. I know UCF starts tomorrow.
Yep, we got not a huge first game,
Okay.
hopefully, but let's not jinx it and
Yeah.
let's go Knights.
Yeah. My
So-
wife's FSU, so they started last week, so we won't bring that topic up right now.
I won't tell you.
But I told her it's a long season, 12-team playoff. You got plenty of opportunities. So
There are teams that are just hard to beat. Maybe
Sure.
their coaching staff just instills that mentality for them
Sure.
because Georgia Tech is just always a tough team. For some reason,
Mhm.
these other teams with these heavy run programs like Navy, Georgia Tech, used to be Purdue, but Purdue at home is always tough anyway.
Mhm.
It's just teams that they can be a 400 team that year. They could be unranked. You could think, oh, you're going to overlook them, and then they're just going to.
Yeah. Every time you overlook, you say, oh, you got to play the games because you never know. So I'm excited it's back. So check back in 3 or 4 months and see how excited I am with the
Absolutely.
schedule. But anyway, yeah, I hope today was insightful for some people.
Well, we'll be talking much more business and college football, fun topics on episode 5. So please check us out and like and subscribe. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.